Hello and welcome to the Revolutionary Radio Project. I'm your host, Rob Skiba, and I just looked on my TFR account, and this is episode number 199. Wow, one episode away from 200, and I just saw earlier today that I just passed the 200,000 subscriber mark on YouTube. So big shout out to everybody on YouTube. Thank you guys so much for making that happen. Thank you so much to our supporters. We couldn't do it without you. I mean that sincerely, and I'm sorry I don't say it often enough, but thank you for all of you out there who are supporting us and keeping us going. I mean, seriously, there is no way we could do this without your support, so we thank you so much for that. And I'm excited to be joined this evening for a continuing study on the book of Genesis with related ancient texts that go along with it. And my co-host for this Quest4Truth series is Zen Garcia. Are you there, sir?
I am, brother. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing really good, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well as well. Congratulations on the numbers. That's pretty amazing. That's quite an extensive outreach.
Yeah, that was pretty exciting. It seemed like it was stalled out at like 185 forever. It was just like it just sat there, and then recently I just looked and I said, wow, it's over 200. So that's pretty exciting, although we're not getting nearly that many views. So it's kind of, it's odd. You have 200,000 subscribers, but you seem to cap out at like 16,000 views, so it's like that shadow banning thing works.
Are definitely being messed with, suppressed for certainty.
Yeah. So last week on your show, we were closing out the show, and I was asking you about the Chronicles of Jeremiah and the Book of the Bee. And you're doing your best to explain all that right before we ran out of time. The show ended. And the question I wanted to ask at the end of it, but we ran out of time, was why is the Book of the Bee called the Book of the Bee? What's
Good
the bee?
Question.
It doesn't say?
Not that I know of. Not for like nothing that stood out, or even in Wikipedia, I don't think it says why it's called that.
So there's nothing obvious in the text as to why it's called that, huh?
It doesn't say it, unless I've skipped over it. But I don't recall offhand. Have you checked in on Wiki or?
No, I had forgotten about the question. I was trying to get caught up to see where we left off before prepping for this show, and it was right at the end of that and it was just as the music was starting. I'm like, why is it called the Book of the Bee? And they were like, okay, see you next week. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna remember to ask it again. But no, I hadn't looked into it at all. But I mean, anything that you've read from that book is very interesting.
It's very interesting. But
that's a New Testament apocryphal text. It's in the New Testament era, right?
Yes, it's specific to the 6,000 years. It says, of the author of the Book of the Bee, the Bishop Shelaman or Solomon, but very little is known. He was a native of Kelat or Akalat in Armenia.
All right.
He's a Nestorian, a religious profession, whatever a Nestorian is. Al-Basra in Iraq is what it says. AD 1222.
So it's a late text. 12 in the 1200s.
Yeah, but again, all these manuscripts are really old, because like the Rabbi Eleazar and the Cave of Treasures and others, he's just compiling from manuscripts that already were in existence.
Kind of like Ginsburg did with...
Yeah, exactly, right.
Gotcha. Speaking of some of these ancient texts and compiling and stuff like that, we were looking into something a while back on the Sword of Methuselah.
Oh
And
yeah, right.
anyway, I spent all day today building that in 3D. I created a 3D model for I'm just
Cool.
making it up out of the top of my head, but we're making a lot of progress on the video game side. Actually, there's 3 games going on at the same time right now.
Wow.
Yeah, I've got different people working on them, and whenever there was like any kind of tension with people that are wanting to help but not really jiving with what was already being done, I'm like, okay, well, I can either continue to deal with that or just say, hey, what are you passionate about? What do you really want to do? I mean, I really want to take advantage of the fact that you want to help me. So if you want to help me, what is it that you are most passionate about? What do you want to do? And they would tell me. So I'm like, okay, well, why don't we spin it off into this then? So we have one game that's taking place, and I thought it'd be cool to go back to young Methuselah, like when he's just about 30 years of age and he's being trained up to be the Melchizedek, and Enoch is warning that he may not be around for that much longer, you know.
Hmm.
And so
Yeah, that's a
yes,
yeah, because the whole flood is linked to his life.
yeah, with his death comes the judgment, right?
Yeah, exactly right.
But I don't know about you, but whenever I think of some of these characters, well, probably most of these characters, I always envision them as old guys with long beards, white hair,
Yeah, you're right.
and you just like, no, these guys, they were young too once.
Yeah, exactly right.
Why do I need to pigeonhole Methuselah to 969 years of age on his deathbed when I can go
Hmm.
way back, and there's a good 900 years to deal with, 969 before the flood. So I thought, why don't we jump into the game in the last like 150, 160 years left of the Clash of the Titans. So it's at the height of the Clash of the Titans, and so the game's gonna start like boom, right in there, and thinking about gameplay and what the perks are, what the goals are, what the weaponry is, what the enemy is, that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
I thought, I'm gonna just sit down and make this sort of Methuselah thing. Now the guy that was helping me, he did a early draft. He created a model, and it was cool, but I wanted it to be more. His was more elegant looking, and I wanted it more formidable.
Hmm.
And so I was thinking more along the lines of, I don't know if you remember the movie Conan the Barbarian and Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah, right.
You just do a Google for Conan's sword. That's a beefy, intimidating looking sword.
Yes.
So kind of using that as sort of the loose template, came up with this idea for a nice beefy broadsword like that has a jewel in it that will like begin to illuminate, sort of like the
Hmm.
the Uman and Thuman deal.
Yeah.
Whenever the player is near a fallen angel or a demon.
Yes.
So it lets the player, you could use the sword to fight off Nephilim and hybrids and stuff, but if
Hmm.
you're dealing with something on a higher, more supernatural level, this thing will illuminate. And I'm not going to give a whole lot
Yeah.
more than that, but there's a lot more to the sword. But that's the first part of it. And then after that, the sword effectively sort of becomes like maybe I'll say like a lightsaber. Not quite, but
Oh, cool. Right on.
similar in the sense that it changes a bit in order to be able to take on the more supernatural stuff.
Hmm.
And that, as Enoch's making trips back and forth to heaven and seeing what the Watchers are doing, and everything we've read about in the book of Enoch, I thought, well, maybe he'd equip his son with some kind of power, to be able to make it through all this, especially the Clash of the Titans deal. So anyway, for gameplay purposes, got some pretty cool ideas. Spent most of the day. I finished it up, sent it off to the other guy, and he's like, okay. And he's gonna incorporate it into Unreal Engine, which is the software we're using for the video game programming.
Right on.
So we
Well,
got
the whole concept of the Sword of Methuselah is pretty amazing.
way cool.
Giant killer, and around that whole era, dealing with the Nephilim, the men of renown, that offspring, and then for it to have been known to have slaughtered, many of these. And obviously, it did a good job because it kept him alive.
Yeah.
In the whole process, So he lived to be the oldest person ever.
Yeah. And we're dealing with the staff too, because I'm thinking, he's a Melchizedek. So he's got a sword. We're going to have three things: a sword, scepter, and staff. So the sword and scepter represent kingship, warfare and kingship.
Mm-hmm.
And the staff will represent the priesthood.
Yeah.
So at some point, I really want to get with you and kind of get your cliff notes on attributes of the staff and things that you know about. I think most of that's probably post-flood, right? Or is there pre-flood evidence of it too?
Yeah. Well, no, there is some stuff, that, especially that talks about the inscriptions, the prophetic inscriptions that were on the staff, even when it was given to Adam, like the 10 plagues that would occur during the Exodus. And also there were the names of, it says 6 matriarchs and 3 of the patriarchs, and then the Yod-He Vod-He,
Nice.
the Tetragrammaton. And so, yeah, and it was said to be a sapphire staff as well.
Now, what does it mean by that? Is it wooden with a sapphire stone, or is it made out of sapphire?
I'm not sure. It says it was a limb from the tree of life.
Yeah.
And so if it was sapphire, was it encrusted or transformed or changed? I don't know. It's just, the mythology behind it and what it was said to have been inscribed. And but yeah, it's a pretty amazing relic.
Yeah. Well, this is what's fun about the video game side, because everything I'm doing in the video games are tied into the TV series. So all the assets will be shared, the storylines will be shared, the plots. What I'm not talking about directly in the TV series will be dealt in the game, and vice versa. So there's a ton of tie-ins, and it's been a lot of fun. It's actually been pretty cool. I got another guy who's trying to learn Unity. Unity is another software package that people use to create video games. Unity and Unreal are practically the same software. I mean, there's obvious differences too, but they do the same thing. So, it's kind of like Final Draft. Not Final Draft. Well, yeah, Final Cut. Final Cut on a Mac and Adobe Premiere Pro. Basically, the same software. They do the same thing, but one's on a Mac and one's on a PC. So anyway, this guy, he already knew Unreal, but he's teaching himself Unity, and he said, well, instead of using the assets that they give you to do the tutorials, he said, I'm going to follow along with the tutorial but build a custom game for you using your assets. So I said, okay, well, why don't we do this? Because the teaser that the guys in South Africa are working on ends with my Avenger crew crashing in the Solomon Islands in 1942. And after he survives the crash and there's an encounter with a giant there, it fades to black, and then we flash forward 60 years into our day, and it's his son who is on the speaking tour, and he's like, whether we're talking about my father's encounter in the Solomon Islands that I just showed you, or the epic tales of antiquity, one thing's for certain, we're not alone here. And so I thought, well, what happens to that guy? I got 60 years to fill in with that guy that would crash in the Solomon Islands. And there's a book, Solomon Island Mysteries, that we've talked about a number of times on the show. And so I told the guy about the book, and I showed him what I'm doing with the teaser. I said, why don't we, in the game that he's doing, why don't we pick up where the teaser leaves off? What happens to Lieutenant Kane, and how does he survive a ton of giants between where he is and the destination that he has to get to on the other side of Guadalcanal? So we brainstormed that. So we got the continuation of the teaser, we got the beginning of Methuselah, and we have the epic quest of Shem, Ham, and Japheth to acquire the bones of Adam. In 3 games going on at the same time right now. So
wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, keeping me busy, man. It's all good.
Yeah, no doubt. You're doing it up, though.
Well, these shows that we're doing, every time we do, something, we pull out another interesting tidbit. I'm going, okay, I got to find a way to incorporate
Yes.
that. We got to incorporate that somehow.
Right.
And for the audience out there, that's the whole purpose of Seed. I mean, we're doing these shows; these are great. We get 10,000, 20,000 views on YouTube. That's cool. But what if we could take the content that we're talking about in this marathon series we're doing and put it into a mainstream narrative that the world would actually want to watch, and we could reach millions of people? And
man, why wouldn't they want to watch it?
Oh yeah, if we do it right, if it's done with the same level of quality that we're used to seeing in Mandalorian or Fringe or anything else that you're watching on TV,
right?
Then it can be awesome. I mean, the stuff we're talking about, is amazing story potential.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So,
yeah, I agree.
Excited to jump back into it. I was watching the show we did last week, and we basically left off with. Oops, let me just pull something up here. We read Genesis 14, and you read from the Targum and the writings of Abraham. I want to pick up in Jubilees. We haven't been in Jubilees for a while. So I believe I left off in Jubilees chapter 12, and I'll go ahead and read Jubilees 13, then you can read whatever you might have on tap, and then after that I'll do Joshua 16, which is covering the same ground of
all right.
14. Is all right? Sound cool?
Sounds good.
Okay, we got about 10 minutes before the break. I should be able to get through this, I think. Let me switch over here. Jubilees chapter 13. And Abram journeyed from Haran, and he took Sarai his wife, and Lot his brother Haran's son, to the land of Canaan. And he came into Asher, and proceeded to Shechem, and dwelt near a lofty oak. And he saw, and behold, the land was very pleasant, from the entering of Hamath to the lofty oak. And the Lord said to him, To thee and to thy seed will I give this land. And he built an altar there, and he offered thereon a burnt sacrifice to the Lord, who had appeared to him. And he removed from thence unto the mountain Bethel on the west, and Ai on the east, and pitched his tent there. And he saw, and behold, the land was very wide and good, and everything grew thereon, vines and figs, pomegranates, oaks, and elixus, and terebinths, and oil trees, and cedars, and cypresses, and date trees, and all trees of the field, and there was water on the mountains. And he blessed the Lord, who had led him out of Ur the Chaldees, and had brought him to this land. And it came to pass in the first year, in the 7th week, on the new moon of the first month, that he built an altar on this mountain, and called on the name of the Lord. Thou, the eternal God, art my God. And he offered on the altar a burnt sacrifice unto the Lord, that he should be with him, and not forsake him all the days of his life. And he removed from thence, and went towards the south. And he came to Hebron, and Hebron was built at that time, and he dwelt there 2 years. And he went thence into the land of the south, to Bealoth, and there was a famine in the land. And Abram went into Egypt in the 3rd year of the week, and he dwelt in Egypt 5 years before his wife was torn away from him. Now Taneas in Egypt was at the time built 7 years after Hebron. And it came to pass, when Pharaoh seized Sarai, the wife of Abram, that the Lord plagued Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. And Abram was very glorious by reason of possessions in sheep and cattle and asses and horses and camels and men servants and maidservants, and in silver and gold exceedingly. And Lot also, his brother's son, was wealthy. And Pharaoh gave back Sarai, the wife of Abram, and he sent him out of the land of Egypt, and he journeyed to the place where he had pitched his tent at the beginning, to the place of the altar, with Ai on the east and Bethel on the west. And he blessed the Lord his God, who had brought him back in peace. And it came to pass in the 41st Jubilee, in the 3rd year of the 1st week, that he returned to his place, and offered thereon a burnt sacrifice, and called on the name of the Lord, and said, Thou, the Most High God, art my God forever and ever. And in the 4th year of this week, Lot parted from him, and Lot dwelt in Sodom. And the men of Sodom were sinners exceedingly. And it grieved him in his heart that his brother's son had parted from him, for he had no children. In that year, when Lot was taken captive, the Lord said to Abram, after that Lot had parted from him, in the 4th year of this week, Lift up thine eyes from the place where thou art dwelling, northward and southward and westward and eastward. For all the land which thou seest I will give to thee and to thy seed forever, and I will make thy seed as the sand of the sea. Though a man may number the dust of the earth, yet thy seed shall not be numbered. Arise, walk through the land, in the length of it and the breadth of it, and see it all. For to thy seed will I give it. And Abram went to Hebron and dwelt there. And in this year came Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Amraphel, king of Shinar, and Arioch, king of Salasar, and Turgal, king of nations, and slew the king of Sodom, and slew the king of Gomorrah, and the king of Sodom, fled. And many fell through the wounds in the vale of Siddim by the salt sea. And they took captive Sodom, and Adam and Zeboim, and they took captive Lot also, the son of Abram's brother, and all his possessions, and they went to Dan. And one who had escaped came and told Abram that his brother's son had been taken captive, and Abram armed his household servants. For Abram and for his seed 1/10 of the first fruits of the Lord, and the Lord ordained it as an ordinance forever, that they should give it to the priests who serve before him, that they should possess it forever. And to this law there is no limit of days, for he hath ordained it for the generations forever, that they should give to the Lord the 10th of everything, of the seed, of the wine, and of the oil, and of the cattle, and of the sheep. And he gave it unto his priests to eat and to drink with joy before him. And the king of Sodom came to him, and bowed himself before him, and said, Our Lord Abram, give unto us the souls which thou hast rescued, but let the booty be thine. And Abram said to him, I lift up my hands to the Most High God, that from a thread to a shoe latchet I shall not aught that is thine, lest thou shouldest say, I have made Abram rich, save only what the young men have eaten, and the portion of the men who went with me, Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre. These shall take their portion. And so that's the Jubilees rendition of Genesis 14. And we got about 4 minutes before we go to break. Anything catch your eye there?
No, it just, another parallel account of the same story. And whenever, we get to another point, I'll read from the Legends of the Jews. And it's, in line with what you were reading from Jubilees.
Okay. And I've got Joshua 16 queued up. So I'll read that after we get back from the break. Nothing really jumped out at me. Again, it's more of the same. It's interesting because the Jubilees account covers Genesis 12, 13, and 14, all in that one chapter, pretty much. Mm-hmm. Did you read anything about the Oak of Mamre? Anything of significance in anything? It's like this is known as it's a lofty oak here in Joshua, but in Jubilees, but Genesis and I think Joshua also talk about being the Oak of Mamre. So it was a significant thing for people to refer to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, not that I remember. Nothing that stands out of great significance. But yeah, I have seen mentioned in several places the Oak of Mamre, and so it has to be memorable.
Yeah. Well, we have the Confederate Amorites. I believe that they were giants of Mamre, Aner, and Eshcol. So it's the Oak of Mamre, and we have the person of Mamre. So I wonder, if that has something to do with it. I don't know. I'm going to have to actually look up what Mamre means. If there's anything significant out there, Mamre. Let me see here.
Yeah, because that was the name of one of the Confederates too, right?
Yeah, Mamre.
Yeah.
His name means causing fatness. I guess his mother was bitter. You made me fat.
Right. Oh my goodness, that's funny.
Causing fatness. Why else would you name your kid that, right?
Right.
Aner.
That is funny.
Aner means a lamp swept away. Eshkol, I think, has something to do with grapes, if memory serves. Eshkol. And for people that are wondering, I'm using a really handy resource that I recommend you guys get. It's called The Dictionary of Scripture Proper Names by J.B. Jackson. It's a really handy tool to have nearby. Eshkol means a cluster.
Yeah. Must be connected to grapes.
Yeah. I'm not getting a whole lot out of that. All right. Well, this is called stalling for time here. We got like a minute before the break. So it's like come up with general banter just to get us through.
Yeah, I was mentioning, I read that very last part of the writings of Abraham and how it's specific to Christ. Well,
yes.
I was looking up something in the Testament of Adam, and this has something really specific to Christ.
All right.
I'll read it really quickly.
You won't have time. You got 4 seconds before break, so this is our cliffhanger.
Yeah, we'll do it another time.
Or we come back.
Extendivite is more than just a heart tonic. Do you have any of these symptoms? Night cramps in the hands and feet. Your arms and legs often go to sleep. On short walks, do your legs get aches and pains? Is your memory worse than it used to be? Ankles that swell late in the day? Has your blood pressure increased lately? If you answered yes to even one of these questions, you may have early warning signs of arterial blockages. Your body is saying that it is time to take Extendivite. These are not the normal signs of aging. They are the warning signs that accompany blocked arteries. Get your Extendivite today. Extendivite is available in capsule or liquid form for just $69.95 for a 2-month supply. To get started, call 1-877-928-8822. That's 1-877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com.
Extend your life with Extendivite.
Poor water quality is a major health issue, and it's only getting worse. Municipalities can't keep up. Standards have dropped, and pollutants are increasing. Where does it all end? It ends by keeping the pollutants outside of your home with HydroCare's advanced systems available at Wave Home Solutions. No less than the best purification materials and processes have been developed by HydroCare to provide you with healthy, clean water for drinking, cooking, and showering. HydroCare far surpasses the competition in removing chlorine, odors, iron, lead, chemicals, limescale, and much more. Don't settle for less when it comes to your water. We'll take care of the toughest water problems for you. With a city or well source. Satisfaction guaranteed. For more information, call 888-997-WAVE. That's 888-997-WAVE. Or go to bestwater123.com. That's bestwater123.com.
Wave Home Solutions for a healthy, comfortable home.
Dowsing is the ancient science of finding water and metal underground. Albert Einstein said that dowsing was tapping into earth energies which modern science as yet does not understand. Diamonds, silver, gold, and platinum objects have all been found using dowsing. And now, for the first time on film, we visit the pyramids, Stonehenge, and ancient sites, dowsing for buried treasure and tapping into this mysterious earth energy.
The Enigma Channel. Intelligent television for planet Earth. EnigmaTV.com.
No hate, no hype, no fear. We are TFR, your protection From deception.
And we're back on the Revolutionary Radio Project. I'm your host, Rob Skiba, and during the break I was looking up the Oak of Mamre. Apparently there's something that people think may have been the Oak of Mamre. It's a very large and gnarly, strange-looking tree that's currently being held up by metal beams, but people think that that might be it. It's not as nearly as impressive as I would have imagined it to be, but yeah. Did a little bit of looking.
Still alive, huh?
Yeah, some say that it's estimated to be 5,000 years old.
Wow.
That's pretty crazy. Pretty wild.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
I was reading a religion wiki, Oak of Mamre, also called the Oak of Sibta. Estimated this oak is approximately 5,000 years old. Interesting.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive.
So you left us with a bit of a cliffhanger. We ran out of time. You were going to look at some other text.
I wanted to share really quickly because we were talking about in the last show we ended with something that was specific to Christ in the writings of Abraham, which always makes you wonder, if those kind of things were placed in or after, of course, after his coming in first incarnation, but. There are many texts, and I wrote a book about this called The Ancient Prophecies of Christ, that have really specific passages that talk about, even his virgin birth and death, resurrection, all that. But I'll share one. This is from one of the primary Adamic literature, the text on the life of Adam and Eve. It says, "The prophecy Adam said to Seth, his son, 'You have heard, my son, that God is going to come into the world. After a long time, he will be conceived of a virgin and put on a body, be born like a human being and grow up like a child. He will perform signs and wonders on the earth, will walk on the waves of the sea. He will rebuke the winds and they will be silenced. He will motion to the waves and they will stand still. He will open the eyes of the blind and cleanse the lepers. He will cause the deaf to hear and the mute to speak, and he will straighten the hunchbacked, strengthen the paralyzed, find the lost, drive out evil spirits, and cast out demons. He spoke to me about this in paradise after I picked some of the fruit in which death was hiding. Adam, Adam, do not fear. You wanted to be a god. I will make you a god, not right now, but after a space of many years. I'm consigning you to death, and the maggot and the worm will eat your body.' And I answered and said to him, 'Why, my Lord?' And he said to me, 'Because you listened to the words of the serpent. You and your posterity will be food for the serpent. But after a short time there will be mercy on you, because you were created in my image, and I will not leave you to waste away in Sheol. For your sake I will be born of the Virgin Mary. For your sake I will taste death and enter the house of the dead, and for your sake I will make a new heaven, and I will be established over your posterity. And after 3 days, while I'm in the tomb, I will raise up the body I received from you, and I will set you at the right hand of my divinity, and I will make you a god just like you wanted. And I will receive favor from God, and I will restore to you and your posterity that which is in the justice of heaven. You have heard, my son Seth, that a flood is coming and will wash the whole earth because of the daughters of Cain, your brother, who killed your brother Abel out of passion, and your sister Labuda, since sins have been created through your mother Eve. And after the flood there will be 6,000 years left to the form of the world, and then its end will come.' But there are many other primary Adamic literatures, all about the life of Adam and Eve that are also pretty specific. And then the testaments of the 12 patriarchs, which mention the books of Enoch the righteous, and then also have, like, we went through the book of Enoch and it was messianic and in Revelation, and so there are also allusions to the knowledge that they knew that Christ would come into form, be born of a virgin, immaculately conceived, and that he would die and be resurrected, and also restore Adam back to his first estate. So all these things were, knowledge that was known even before his coming.
Yeah, that was interesting. I saw something. I don't remember what it was I was looking at, but that in the Testament of the what's it called? The Testament of the
12 patriarchs.
The 12 patriarchs. That like Dan and I think one or two others mentioned specifically that they had read in the book of Enoch.
Oh yeah, there's many of them actually. I think like maybe 6 of them. But yeah, they speak of reading about it in the books of Enoch the righteous.
Yeah, that's a pretty interesting endorsement. Again, my thing is trying to vet the dating of these books. Like, I find it hard to believe that what you just read predates Christianity. Because it's so specifically
of all this
mentioning Mary and stuff like that. So it appears that people started writing pseudo fictional novels maybe to tell us bedtime stories to their kids or whatnot to help explain the events of Scripture through storytelling, and that's what it appears to me. But I find that stuff interesting because, I mean, look at how much modern Christianity relies on modern scholarship. You're quoting Spurgeon, or you're quoting this guy or that guy, or whoever, Schofield Reference Bible. We're always quoting commentary today from 20th, from going back maybe the 1600s up to today, right? Various great awakenings and whatever, evangelists and what have you. So we'll quote these people giving commentary on Scripture, and nobody even bats an eye at that. But then when you start to show commentary written by people from the 1st century or earlier, all of a sudden, no, we can't look at that. You know what I mean? It's like, it doesn't make any sense. The logic makes no sense to me. It's like these people are closer to the original source information than we are. So even if they're giving commentary, it's valuable in the sense that it shows us how they understood it, being closer to the source material than we are.
Yeah, I would think that would be more as far as being a confirming witness.
Yeah. And what you just read said that you and your posterity will be food for the serpent. That sounded really like that's interesting. Cannibalism.
I interpret like the serpent being feeding off the dust of the earth, that our bodies are made of dust, and that they were cannibals. And there's even a text called the Apocalypse of Moses that describes Cain drinking the blood of Abel after he had murdered him.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a fascinating text as well. And that Adam and Eve see in a dream that he's doing this. He's consuming the blood of Abel.
Wow. And the text that you just read also said 6,000 years after the flood would be the end or something, it sounded like?
Yes, the end of that second world age.
So that's pretty crazy, because the flood, well, at least by the Masoretic text, dates back to roughly round to 2400 BC. It's like 2300 and change, 2348 or something like that.
Unless you take that to be the flood that led to the earth becoming without form and void. Because remember in 2 Peter chapter 3, where it speaks
talking
about
Adam.
The world that. Yeah, true. But I was just thinking that the second world age because in the Genesis 1:2, the flood that destroyed the earth there, it was the second world age that was 6,000 years after that flood. And so
Well, I mean, because the Septuagint and some of the, like the Book of Adam and Eve and others we've discussed on the show before, talk about 5,500 years from Adam would be Messiah, and that's like a good 1,500 years longer than the Masoretic text. King James would have you. That's why people like Bishop Ussher and others that have done timelines, including myself, Dr. Ken Johnson and others, peg creation at roughly, Bishop Ussher said 4004 BC, but roughly, let's just say somewhere in the 4000 BC timeframes, or about 6,000 years ago from now.
Right.
But all that's like way off, and that's if you go. I like the idea of 120 Jubilees, although I maintain that Genesis 6:3 has nothing to do with Jubilees. That the numbers add up interesting, that you could have the 6,000 years of humanity and 1,000-year millennial reign, so 7,000 years total. That I like that. It's a nice, neat package with a bow on it.
Yeah.
But so many of these other texts refute that idea, and
I agree.
If anything is to be believed in some of this stuff, like what you just read, we've got a long way to go. Unfortunately, if it's 6,000 years from the flood, that he's talking to Adam there, 6,000 years from the flood. Wow, I mean, we are, right now only 4,000 years from the flood by the Messianic.
So we think, yeah.
Yeah, according to the current timeline that many people subscribe to. But then again, there's the whole mud flood theory, and that our time is completely jacked up and we have no idea where we are in time.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Fair enough, I guess. Yeah. All right, so you got something up on your screen there, the Legends of the Jews, War of the Kings?
Yes, the War of the Kings. I'll read this, and it fits right in with what you were talking about with Jubilees, and should fit in with Jasher as well.
Cool.
On his return from Egypt, Abraham's relations to his own family were disturbed by annoying circumstances. Strife developed between the herdmen of his cattle and the herdmen of Lot's cattle. Abraham furnished his herds with muzzles, but Lot made no such provision. And when the shepherds that pastured Abraham's flocks took Lot's shepherds to task on account of the omission, the latter replied, "It is known of a surety that God said unto Abraham, To thy seed will I give the land. But Abraham is a sterile mule, never will he have children. On the morrow he will die, and Lot will be his heir. Thus the flocks of Lot are but consuming what belongs to them, or their master. But God spoke, Verily I said unto Abraham, I would give the land unto his seed, but only after the 7 nations shall have been destroyed from out of the land. Today the Canaanites are therein, and the Perizzites, they still have the right of habitation. Now when the strife extended from the servants to the masters, and Abraham vainly called his nephew Lot to account for his unbecoming behavior, Abraham decided he would have to part from his kinsmen, though he should have to compel Lot thereto by force. Lot thereupon separated himself not from Abraham alone, but from the God of Abraham also, and he betook himself to a district in which immorality and sin reigned supreme. Wherefore punishment overtook him, for his own flesh seduced him later unto sin. God was displeased with Abraham for not living in peace and harmony with his own kindred, as he lived with all the world beside. On the other hand, God also took it in ill part that Abraham was accepting Lot tactically as his heir, though he had promised him in clear, unmistakable words, To thy seed will I give the land. After Abraham had separated himself from Lot, he received the assurance again that Canaan should once belong to his seed, which God would multiply as the sand which is upon the seashore. As the sand fills the whole earth, so the offspring of Abraham would be scattered over the whole earth from end to end, And as the earth is blessed only which it is moistened with water, so his offspring would be blessed through the Torah, which is likened unto water. And as the earth endures longer than metal, so his offspring would endure forever, while the heathen would vanish. And as the earth is trodden upon, so his offspring would be trodden upon by the four kingdoms. The departure of Lot had a serious consequence, for the war waged by Abraham against the four kings is intimately connected with it. Lot desired to settle in the well-watered circle of the Jordan, but the only city of the plain that would receive him was Sodom, the king of which admitted the nephew of Abraham out of consideration for the latter. The 5 impious kings planned first to make war upon Sodom on account of Lot, and then advance upon Abraham. For one of the 5, Amraphel, was none other than Nimrod, Abraham's enemy from of old. The immediate occasion for the war was this: Chedorlaomer, one of Nimrod's generals, rebelled against him after the builders of the tower were dispersed, and he set himself up as king of Elam. Then he subjugated the Hamitic tribes living in the 5 cities of the plain of the Jordan, and made them tributary. For 12 years they were faithful to their sovereign ruler, Chedorlaomer, but then they refused to pay the tribute, and they persisted in their insubordination for 13 years. Making the most of Chedorlaomer's embarrassment, Nimrod led a host of 7,000 warriors against his former general. In the battle fought between Elam and Shinar, Nimrod suffered a disastrous defeat. He lost 600 of his army, and among the slain was the king's son, Mardon. Humiliated and abased, he returned to his country, and he was forced to acknowledge the suzerainty of Chedorlaomer, who now proceed to form an alliance with Arioch, king of Elasar, entitled the king of several nations, the purpose of which was to crush the cities of the circle of the Jordan. The united forces of these kings, numbering 800,000, marched upon the 5 cities, subduing whatever they encountered in their course, and annihilating the descendants of the giants. Fortified places, unwalled cities, and flat open country all fell in their hands. They pushed on through the desert as far as the spring, issuing from the rock at Kadesh, the spot appointed by God as the place of pronouncing judgment against Moses and Aaron on account of the waters of strife. And thence they turned towards the central portion of Palestine, the country of dates, where they encountered the 5 godless kings: Bera, the villain, king of Sodom; Birsha, the sinner, king of Gomorrah; Shinab, the father-hater, king of Admah; Shemeber, the voluptuary, king of Zebulun; and the king of Bela, the city that devours its inhabitants. The 5 were routed in the fruitful vale of Siddim, the canals of which later formed the Dead Sea. They that remained of the rank and file fled to the mountain, but the king fell into the slime pits and stuck there. Only the king of Sodom was rescued miraculously, for the purpose that he might convert those heathen to faith in God that had not believed in the wonderful deliverance of Abraham from the fiery furnace. The victors despoiled Sodom of all its goods and victuals, and took Lot, boasting, "We have taken the son of Abraham's brother captive," so betraying the real object of their undertaking. Their innermost desire was to strike at Abraham. It was on the first evening of the Passover, and Abraham was eating of the unleavened bread, when the Archangel Michael brought him the report of Lot's captivity. The angel bears another name besides Palat, the escaped, because when God threw Samael and his host from their holy place in heaven, the rebellious leader held on to Michael and tried to drag him along downward, and Michael escaped, falling from heaven only through the help of God. When the report of his nephew's evil state reached Abraham, he straightway dismissed all thought of his dissensions with Lot from his mind and only considered ways and means of deliverance. He convoked his disciples, to whom he had taught the true faith, and who all called themselves by the name Abraham. He gave them gold and silver, saying at the same time, "Know that we go to war for the purpose of saving human lives. Therefore do you not direct your eyes upon money. Here lie gold and silver before you." Furthermore, he admonished them in these words, "We are preparing to go to war. Let none join us who hath committed to a trespass and fears that divine punishment will descend upon him." Alarmed by his warning, not one would obey his call to arms. They were fearful on account of their sins. Eleazar alone remained with him, wherefore God spake and said, "All forsook thee, save only Eleazar. Verily I shall invest him with the strength of the 318 men, whose aid thou didst seek in vain." The battle fought with the mighty host of the kings, from which Abraham emerged victorious, happened on the 15th of Nissan, the night appointed for miraculous deeds. The arrows and stones hurled at him affected not, but the dust of the ground, the shaft, and the stubble which he threw at the enemy were transformed into death-dealing javelins and swords. Abraham, as tall as 70 men set on end, and requiring as much food and drink as 70 men, marched forward with giant strides, each of his steps measuring 4 miles, until he overtook the kings and annihilated their troops. Further, he could not go, for he had reached Dan, where Jeroboam, who once raised the golden calves, and on this ominous spot Abraham's strength diminished. His victory was possible only because the celestial powers espoused his side. The planet Jupiter made the night bright for him, and an angel, Layla by name, fought for him. In a true sense, it was a victory of God. All the nations acknowledged his more than human achievement, and they fashioned a throne for Abraham and erected it on the field of battle. When they attended to seat him upon it, amid exclamations of "Thou art our King, thou art our Prince, thou art our God," Abraham warded them off and said, "The universe has its King and has its God." He declined all honors and returned his property unto each man. Only the little children he kept by himself. He reared them in the knowledge of God, and later they atoned for the disgrace of their parents. Somewhat arrogantly, the king of Sodom set out to meet Abraham. He was proud that a great miracle, his rescue from the slime pit, had been performed for him too. He made Abraham the proposition that he keep the despoiled goods for himself, but Abraham refused them and said, "I have lifted up mine hand unto the Lord God Most High, who hath created the world for the sake of the pious, that I will not take a thread nor a shoe latchet, nor aught that is thine. I have no right upon any goods taken as spoils, save only that which the young men have eaten, and the portion of the men who tarried by the stuff, through they went not down to the battle itself." The example of Abraham in giving a share in the spoils even unto the men not concerned directly in the battle was followed later by David, who heeded not the protests of the wicked men and the base fellows with him, that the watchers who stayed by the stuff were not entitled to share alike with the warriors that had gone down to the battle. In spite of his great success, Abraham nevertheless was concerned about the issue of the war. He feared that the prohibition against shedding the blood of man had been transgressed, and he also dreaded the resentment of Shem, whose descendants had perished in the encounter. But God reassured him and said, "Be not afraid. Thou hast but extirpated the thorns, and as to Shem, he will bless thee rather than curse thee." So it was, when Abraham returned from the war, Shem, or as he is sometimes called, Melchizedek, the king of righteous priest of God Most High, and king of Jerusalem, came forth to meet him with bread and wine. And this high priest instructed Abraham in the laws of the priesthood and in the Torah, and to prove his friendship for him, he blessed him and called him the partner of God in the possession of the world, seeing that through him the name of God had first been made known among men. But Melchizedek arranged the words of his blessing in an unseemly way. He named Abraham first and then God, and as a punishment he was deposed by God from the priestly dignity, and instead it was passed over to Abraham, with whose descendants it remained forever. As a
break.
Okay.
Truth Frequency Radio is your #1 source for news and information without the hate, hype, and fear. We're proud to feature cutting-edge programs like Beyond the Veil with Chris and Cherie Geo, X Squared with Brooks Agnew, Paranormal Portal with Brent Thomas, Jeranism Raw with Jaron and Missa, Fearless with Frank Castle, Strange World with Mark Sargent, The Eye of Ra with Ra Castaldo, The Infinite Fringe with Billy Ray, Ironworks with Josh Corey, The Kev Baker Show, and dozens more. Did you know you can listen from any telephone by dialing 641-793-7117 or call into your favorite show toll free at 833-TFR Live. Uncensored talk and news you won't hear on the mainstream media. Truth Frequency Radio, your protection from deception.
Warnings of foreign election interference. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. The Director of National Intelligence, John Ratcliffe, and FBI Director Christopher Wray warning that Iran is behind phony emails threatening voters in several states.
According to Ratcliffe, Iran sent out spoof emails to intimidate voters, incite unrest, and damage President Trump. Ratcliffe offered this advice to voters who received such a threat.
Do not allow these efforts to have their intended effect. If you receive an intimidating or manipulative email in your inbox, don't be alarmed and do not spread it.
In addition to sending out the emails, Ratcliffe said Iran is posting videos online implying fraudulent ballots could be cast both domestically and from overseas.
Fox's David Lee Miller says the intelligence chief also warns Russia is trying to spread false information to undermine confidence in the American election. President Trump holding another campaign rally warning North Carolina voters against a Joe Biden presidency.
They'll order you to stay at home while letting rioters and MS-13 killers roam free without masks. Without masks. MS-13 doesn't have to wear a mask.
The two men will meet Thursday night in the final presidential debate in Nashville. Joe Biden still off the trail for debate prep. His campaign sending out former President Obama Wednesday to a campaign event in Philadelphia.
This I know to be true. Joe and Kamala will protect your health care and expand Medicare and make insurance more affordable for everybody.
3 crew members from the International Space Station have landed in Kazakhstan on their return flight to Earth. NASA astronaut Chris Cassidy among them. Wall Street Wednesday, the Dow dropping 97 points, NASDAQ off 31, the S&P 500 closing 7 points lower. America is listening to Fox News.
You are now tuned into the Truth Frequency.
We are TFR. TFR.
Radio.
And we're back on the Revolutionary Radio Project. I'm your host, Rob Skiba, for the final... Well, we're not the final. We got 2 more sessions left. We're in the second hour of the broadcast. Yeah, that's what we're at. Time's flying by. Right before the break, you were reading some pretty wild stuff from the Legends of the Jews. Definitely want to comment on some things, but I'll let you complete what you were reading so we can finish that up and go from there.
One more paragraph, and then there's one other small section.
Okay.
As a reward for the sanctification of the holy name which Abraham had brought about when he refused to keep aught of the goods taken in battle, his descendants received 2 commands: the command of the threads in the borders of the garments, and the command of the latchets to be bound upon their hands, and to be used as frontlets between their eyes. Thus they commemorate that their ancestor refused to take so much as a thread or a latchet, and because he would not touch a shoe latchet of the spoils, his descendants cast their shoe upon Edom. Shortly after the war, God revealed himself unto Abraham to soothe his conscience as to the spilling of innocent blood, for it was a scruple that gave him much anguish of spirit. God assured him at the same time that he would cause pious men to arise among his descendants, who like himself would be a shield unto their generation. As a further distinction, God gave him leave to ask what he would have. Rare grace accorded to none beside, except Jacob, Solomon, Ahaz, and the Messiah. Abraham spoke and said, O Lord of the world, if in time to come my descendants should provoke thy wrath, it were better I remained childless. Lot, for the sake of whom I journeyed as far as Damascus, where God was my protection, would be well pleased to be my heir. Moreover, I have read in the stars, Abraham, thou wilt beget no children. Thereupon God raised Abraham above the vault of the skies, and he said, Thou art a prophet, not an astrologer. Now Abraham demanded no sign that would be blessed with offspring. No sign that he would be blessed with offspring. Without losing another word, he believed in the Lord, and he was rewarded for his simple faith by a share in this world and a share in the world to come as well. And besides, the redemption of Israel from the exile will take place as a recompense for his firm trust. But though he believed the promise made him with a full and abiding faith, he yet desired to know by what merit of theirs his descendant would maintain themselves. Therefore, God bade him bring a sacrifice of 3 heifers, 3 she-goats, 3 rams, a turtle dove, and a young pigeon, thus indicating to Abraham the various sacrifices that once be brought in the temple to atone for the sins of Israel and further his welfare. But what will become of my descendants, asked Abraham, after the temple is destroyed? God replied and said, if they read the order of sacrifices as they will be set down in the scriptures, I will account it unto them as though they had offered the sacrifices, and I will forgive all their sins. And God continued and revealed to Abraham the course of Israel's history and the history of the whole world. The heifer of 3 years indicates the dominion of Babylon. The she-goat of 3 years stands for the empire of the Greeks. The ram of 3 years for the Medo-Persian power. The rule of Ishmael is represented by the ram, and Israel is the innocent dove. Abraham took him these animals, divided them in the midst. Had he not done so, Israel would not have been able to resist the power of the 4 kingdoms. But the birds he divided not, to indicate that Israel remained whole. And the birds of prey came down upon the carcasses, and Abraham drove them away. Thus was announced the advent of the Messiah, who will cut the heathen in pieces. But Abraham bade Messiah wait until the time appointed him. And as the messianic time was made known unto Abraham, so also the time of the resurrection of the dead, when he laid the halves of the pieces over against each other, the animals became alive again, and the bird flew over them. While he was preparing these sacrifices, a vision of great import was granted to Abraham. The sun sank, and a deep sleep fell upon him, and he beheld a smoking furnace, Gehenna, the furnace that God prepares for the sinner. And he beheld a flaming torch, the revelation on Sinai, where all the people saw flaming torches. And he beheld the sacrifices to be brought by Israel. And a horror of great darkness fell upon him, the dominion of the four kingdoms. And God spake to him, Abraham, as long as thy children fulfill the two duties of studying the Torah and performing the service in the temple, the two visitations, Gehenna and alien rule, will be spared them. But if they neglect the two duties, they will have to suffer the two chastisements. Only thou mayest choose whether they shall be punished by means of Gehenna or by means of the dominion of the stranger. All the day long Abraham wavered, until God had called unto him, How long wilt thou halt between two options? Decide for one of the two, and let it be for the dominion of the stranger. Then God made known to him the 400 years bondage of Israel in Egypt, reckoning from the birth of Isaac. For unto Abraham himself was the promise given, that he should go to his father in peace, and feel not of the arrogance of the stranger, oppressor. And the same time it was made known to Abraham that his father Terah would have a share in the world to come, for he had done penance for his sinful deeds. Furthermore, it was revealed to him that his son Ishmael would turn into the path of righteousness, while yet his father was alive. And his grandson Esau would not begin his impious way of life until he himself had passed away. And as he received the promise of their deliverance, together with the announcements of the slavery of his seed, in a land not theirs, so it was made known to him that God would judge the four kingdoms and destroy them.
Wow, no, so this is coming from the Legend of the Jews, that Legends of the Jews put together by, was it Louis
Ginsburg?
Ginsburg. And to my knowledge, he wasn't a Christian, was he, or a Messianic Jew? He was just a Jewish scholar,
Just
right?
a Jewish scholar, yeah.
So that's interesting, because there's Messianic references in there.
Oh yeah, and like I was saying, in the ancient prophecies of Christ, there's like the Odes of Solomon, the Psalms of Solomon, the Testament of Isaac, the Testament of Jacob. All of these have messianic, prophecies contained in them, as well as does, the ancient Thracian, the Book of Atamanua, which was just recently transcribed in 2006. I mean, there's so many prophecies that were messianic, like the Book of Enoch. I mean, if you really study them all, which is why I don't, I think that Christians did add to certain texts, perhaps, and influence them in that way, but certainly not all of the messianic prophecies were. I do believe some of them, like the Book of Enoch, predate and were older and contained this knowledge because they were prophetic. Just like, all the prophecies in the Bible of the coming of Yeshua, even, Isaiah 53, things of that nature.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm always impressed also at how much of the Legends of the Jews is paralleled in Joshua. Again, it's which came first, chicken or the egg? I mean, is Joshua the way or is Legends of the Jews the way it is because he read and accumulated the writings of Joshua into his collection, or is Joshua influence on the Legends of the Jews? I don't. It seems to me, like we talked about before, that the version of Joshua, at least the one that we published, can be traced back, according to Joseph B. Lumpkin and Dr. Kenneth Johnson and others, back to at least 70 A.D. and likely to the time of Ptolemy at the creation of the Septuagint. So that puts you about 200 B.C. So the current version of Joshua we have goes back to at least 70 or at most that we know of to having been already written and accumulated and read and popular by the time of Ptolemy. So I guess, because Ginsburg was, 1800s or something?
Right, yeah.
So
he's compiling the Midrash, which is...
Of lots of stuff, yeah.
Yeah, it's the oral, the oral tradition, which, goes back even to before the coming of Christ. So.
Well, it certainly does parallel Joshua a lot. Because like the Joshua account also confirms, as does the Legends of the Jews, that Amraphel is Nimrod.
Right.
Where was it? I don't know if it was the Targum or the Writings of Abraham. Something you were reading last week was saying that it was a son of Abram.
Son of, yeah. That's the Writings of Abraham. Yeah.
Writings of Abraham. But as we talked about in the show last week, Amraphel appears to be a title.
Right.
But I mean, he just come around and said this, and also that Melchizedek was Shem. That was interesting, though, that Shem lost the Melchizedek mantle to Abram as a result of saying Abraham's name over Yahuwah's name.
Before
saying it,
he mentioned God's, Yahuwah's.
And so he's like,
or at least that's what it says, yeah.
Yeah, I had wondered how. I mean, I knew it went from Shem to Abram. I never knew how. I just assumed it was because Abram, because it's supposed to go down to the firstborn, their firstborn offspring, but it was always an issue for that happening. But it also, the person it was sort of like a Supreme Court justice kind of thing. You're appointed for life.
Right. Right. Yeah. Exactly.
That if you're living 500 years, well, then you pass it to your nearest worthy descendant.
Yes.
And so, knowing that they overlapped, at least according to the Masoretic timeline, they overlap. I guess it seems like I read somewhere that in the Septuagint timeline they're not contemporary. So, that would certainly. This is what frustrates me. It's because we accept the validity of the Septuagint, at least up to a point. And yet there's so many writings that show that are at least on a timeline that's in agreement with the Septuagint, i.e. 5,500 years from Adam to Messiah.
Right.
And yet there are other things that are in disagreement, like Shem overlapping with Abraham.
Yes.
It's really frustrating.
And Noah as well.
And Noah for a period of time too.
Yeah.
It's for a guy like me that I learn on a linear fashion. I need to go from point A to point Z and figure out everything in between and lay it out in a nice timeline. It's things like that that drive me crazy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I certainly, there seems to be a consensus of texts that agree that Shem overlapped with Abram and that he is the Melchizedek of Genesis.
Right. Exactly, yes.
And Genesis 14, whether you're looking at the Septuagint or the Masoretic text, is still showing Abraham giving tithes to Melchizedek.
Yes.
So
it was Shem in all of these manuscripts.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going with that.
Yeah.
But
there's out of the mouths of 2 or 3 witnesses.
Yeah.
And we have multiple witnesses.
Certainly to that. But that's the first I've heard. I don't know if I'll read the Joshua account in a minute, but I wasn't aware of Shem losing his Melchizedek mantle to Abraham that way. That's interesting.
Yeah, that is.
There's a few other things. I did find it interesting, both in the Genesis account as well as, all the accounts we've read so far, that the king of Bela is unnamed. They never mention him. But this one, what you just read said that this expounded on Bela as the city that devours its inhabitants.
Yeah, that was pretty interesting.
I was like, what?
Yeah, it reminds me of even that the city of the man-eaters that is mentioned in the Great Commission, and I had talked about that in the at the conference as well, that there's this whole Great Commission where Matthias and Andrew are appointed to go to this place called the city of the man-eaters, and they basically all the travelers they come through, they just capture them, they gouge their eyes out, and then they fatten them up like sheep, and then they have a period of time where they bring 7 out at a time, and then they just gut them, drink and capture their blood, and then they have this whole orgy of just drinking and cannibalizing these bodies and these victims, and it's a huge celebration. The entire town comes out to take part in this, and there's actually 2 New Testament kind of apocryphal texts that are part of the ante-Nicene church fathers that are specific to this. One is specific to Andrew, the other one is specific to Matthias, and it both gives the account of them not wanting to go to the city of man-eaters, but they drew the lot, and so they had to.
Oh.
And yeah.
So the disciples didn't want to go there, and
no, they all knew about this place. They did not want to go there.
And it was still in existence at the time of Christ.
Still in existence at the time of Christ, yeah.
Wow.
It was a satanic stronghold.
Wow. I mean, if this isn't confirmation of serpent seed, I don't know what is, especially when you see that, dust you shall eat dust.
Right. Yes, exactly.
Eating humans. I mean, what you read earlier, point blank, said that the serpent's going to eat you.
Yeah, you're going to be the food to the serpent.
Like, wow. I mean, that's a whole other breed of human right there.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And they are
still doing it. Yeah.
They're still doing it.
Yeah. I mean, that's some pretty solid evidence right there.
Yeah, I think so.
And Canaan, the name Canaan itself, the name Canaan means trafficker. A trafficker.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, I mean, I think, we know that the Canaanites were the dominant giant Nephilim that were in the land, named after Canaan. And so, I mean, when you think of human trafficking and you think of, all the horrific stuff that we hear, they're still doing it. It's still happening.
Still doing it, exactly, yes.
Man, I can't wait for Genesis 3:15 to finally manifest, where that is all crushed for good.
Right. Yes.
Man.
Yeah, the harvest.
The other thing that caught my attention was it sounded like Michael has another nickname, Pallet, the escaped.
Yeah.
What was that? It was just kind of random. It was just like.
Yeah, I've read that before. There's a text called "The Enthronement of Michael" that talks about the rebellion of Samael, because Samael is the name of the serpent in the Targum in Genesis 3:6, where it says that the serpent was more subtle. In the Targum, it says more subtle unto evil. But anyways, it names him Samael, the angel of death, in that instead of saying serpent, it says Samael, the angel of death, in replacement of the serpent. But anyways, there's a text called "The Enthronement of Michael" that talks about Samael, that one of the cherubs breaks his wing in order to cast him from heaven, and he grabs hold of Michael and is trying to hold on to him and drags him down.
Wow.
And then God saves him. And that's part of the story, and it's brought forth in that manuscript called the Enthronement of Michael, because Michael then is elevated and given all of the accolades that Satan, lost, and he becomes Satan the adversary, and then Michael is elevated to the chief of the celestial hierarchy as far as being the ruler
under the Godhead.
Under the Godhead, yes.
Because Satan, whatever name you choose to call him, occupied that position as the anointed cherub before.
Exactly.
So, wow, that's fascinating. That's a trippy story right there. I've never heard that before.
Yeah, it really is. That's also mentioned in the Legends of the Patriarchs and the Prophets. It talks about Samael and the fall of the angels, and it actually confirms the chapter 29 and 30 of the book of the Secrets of Enoch that says that this event happened on the second day, and that the war in heaven occurred in the first day, the separation of light and darkness.
So the firmament became the prison.
Yes, became the prison, and it says that as well. It confirms it as being taking place and occurring on the second day.
So why is that inserted here with the story of Abram? Can you scroll back to that paragraph?
Oh yeah, sure.
I want to see that again. It was kind of early on in the reading.
Okay, let's go down.
That one really caught my attention. It's so strange that it's lumped into. I think it was before all that.
Was it?
I think so.
Oh, here it is.
Oh,
yeah, right here.
Right.
It was on the first evening of the Passover. And Abram was eating of the unleavened bread when the Archangel Michael brought him the report of Lot's captivity. This angel bears another name besides Palet, the escape, because when God threw Samael and his host from their holy place in heaven, the rebellious leader held on to Michael and tried to drag him along downward, and Michael escaped falling from heaven only through the help of God.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. So it's just saying that the Archangel Michael came to Abram, and it's saying, by the way, this is the same guy who's known by another name, Palet the escaped, because of this. That's so fascinating. Like visually in my head, I'm as a filmmaker, I'm seeing this, like this, what that looked like, and like as he's leaving heaven, he grabs Michael and tries to pull him down, and then I guess the firmament, God himself rescues Michael and seals up the firmament there or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Michael.
And this again is after the earth became, without form and void, a deserted wasteland and indistinguishable ruin.
Wow, that's pretty cool. And it says the 15th, because that was on the evening of Passover, which would be the 14th, and on the 15th, and it's interesting too. Is saying Abraham was eating unleavened bread. Now this is quite some time before Moses. I mean, this is 430 years.
And remember, this is the evening, and I believe that Sabbath is celebrated only during the daylight hours. In the same way that it was on the 15th on unleavened bread, that in the evening, as the full moon is rising, that they begin their exodus.
Yeah. Well, this is one of those passages, just like the Day of Atonement, that you're supposed to eat the Passover between the two evenings. So you have Passover itself on the 14th of Nissan, but you are to eat between the two evenings. So that's what he's doing. He's eating on the first evening of the Passover. So that's the same time Yeshua ate. The first evening of the Passover, because he died during the day, and then they had the second evening of the Passover. That they had to get him down from the cross in time for that. And it also mentions the 15th of Nisan being the night of miracles.
Right.
In whatever you were reading there. Hadn't heard that before.
And this was also, we were talking about how Abraham passed away on this night, and this is when Esau, after he had killed Nimrod.
Right.
Yeah, and then he went to Abraham, his grandfather's, but then found Isaac and his brother Jacob, and Isaac was in mourning. Jacob was making the lentil soup.
Yeah, right. And it as the firstborn, it was Esau's job. He should have been the one doing that.
Yes.
And Jacob was, he was within his rights. Like, I'm doing your job, dude. Why don't you just give me your birthright? I'm doing what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, and then remember that was when I talked about and I read that whole lengthy passage about how he traded the sword of Methuselah as part of his birthright, and also gave up the cave of Machpelah to Jacob, and the right for the priesthood, which is what Jacob wanted most, was the right to be initiated into the order of the ancients, the church.
Well, yeah, again, this is where, it should go to the firstborn, but it doesn't.
Right, it doesn't.
Ends up going, and that's how Jacob, because, a lot of times the way we hear it in Sunday school and preach in church, it sounds like, Jacob's being a real scumbag. And there are certainly times where he's doing some devious stuff for sure, but he's also, he's got legal right.
Mm-hmm.
Like basically, look, I'm doing your job here. Why don't you just give me your birthright? Says you don't care. You're not doing your job.
Right.
Whoop, off the break.
Oh, it's quick.
Yeah, as usual.
Discover the extraordinary powers of intuitive healing with pain transmutation, a method of holistic healing for the human soul, body, mind, and emotions. If you are looking for answers and a deep understanding of how to help yourself and the people around you to live a happier, healthier life, this is the right place for you. Learn how to read your soul's history in the Akashic Records. Remove negative energy attachments from your astral body, and start the process of inner and outer pain transmutation. Join Pain Transmutation Community to get started on the path of intuitive healing. Change your energetic state, manifest new and exciting experiences, re-energize your life, and build inspiring connections with others in our community.
Do you want to lose weight but have no idea where to begin? The Fast Start Diet, a 3-day weight loss plan, is the answer. 3 days of nutritionally balanced, calorie-restricted meals delivered right to your door. No shopping, no measuring, and no cooking. Everything is prepared for you and ready to eat at home or on the go. The Fast Start Diet has all the amazing benefits of intermittent fasting without starving. We've helped thousands of people who have struggled to reach their weight loss goals. Isn't it time we helped you? With the Fast Start Diet, you'll lose weight and feel great.
Find us on Amazon or go to faststartdiet.com and use promo code POWER to get $10 off your first box. As a special bonus, we will include our #1 rated Lipo3 appetite suppressant spray free with your order. Whatever your diet plans are, start with us at faststartdiet.com and use promo code POWER.
Dowsing is the ancient science of finding water and metal underground. Albert Einstein said that dowsing was tapping into earth energies which modern science as yet does not understand. Diamonds, silver, gold, and platinum objects have all been found using dowsing. And now, for the first time on film, we visit the pyramids, Stonehenge, and ancient sites, dowsing for buried treasure and tapping into this mysterious earth energy.
The Enigma Channel. Intelligent television for planet Earth. EnigmaTV.com.
Real people, Real radio. Wherever you are, make it TFR. Truth Frequency Radio.
And we're back on the Revolutionary Radio Project. I'm your host, Rob Skiba, and this is the final segment of the broadcast. And getting into all kinds of interesting stuff, both looking at these ancient texts as well as seeing some pretty cool stuff in the chat room. Lots of interesting things going on. Somebody said that the TV show Lucifer, and I've not watched that show. I've maybe seen one episode or something. But anyway, supposedly that they actually mentioned that his name is Samael. But the character says he hates that name. Interesting. As we've maintained that Lucifer is not his actual name. That was a marginal note that Jerome wrote, I guess with the Latin Vulgate, that later translators just moved it from the footnotes or margins into the text, and now all of a sudden everybody calls Satan Lucifer. But somebody else was asking, Kevin was asking, do you believe Satan still has access to heaven? And my answer in the chat room was, I think, especially now that I have a better understanding of biblical cosmology, is that he was cast out of heaven. He can't go back to heaven, but the divine council meets at some point below the opening of the north, at the very, I believe that's the top of the high mountain that Yeshua was taken to now, Mount Meru, as other people have called it. That he has access to that point. So that's where he was going, like in the book of Job, for instance, when he's presenting himself, that he's making not above the firmament.
Yeah. And yes, he can meet the mount of the congregation, is also what it's called. But I did find more about, what I had just read about Michael. Cool. I pulled up that passage from the traditions of the legends of the Patriarchs and Prophets, if you want to hear it. All right, this is the fall of the angels. In the beginning, before the creation of heaven and earth, God made the angels, free intelligences and free wills. Out of his love, he made them, that they might be eternally happy, and that their happiness might be complete. He gave them the perfection of a created nature. That is, he gave them freedom. But happiness is only attained by the free will agreeing in its freedom to accord with the will of God. Some of the angels, by an act of free will, obeyed the will of God, and in such obedience found perfect happiness. Other angels, by an act of free will, rebelled against the will of God, and in such disobedience found misery. Such is the Catholic theory on the fall of the angels. Historically, it is presented as a war in heaven. And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. The dragon fought and his angels and prevailed not. Neither was their place found any more in heaven. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil, and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. The reason of the revolt was that Satan desired to be as great as God. Thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation. In the sides of the north I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. The war ended in the fall of Satan and those whom he had led into apostasy. And to this fall are referred the words of Christ, I saw Satan like lightning fall from heaven. Fabricius, in his collections of the apocryphal writings of the Old Testament, has preserved the song of triumph which the Archangel Michael sang on obtaining the victory. This is a portion of it. Glory to our God, praise to his holy name. He is our God, glory be to him. He is our Lord, his be the triumph. He has stretched forth his right hand. He has manifested his power. He has cast down our adversaries. They are mad who resist him. They are accursed who depart from his commandments. He knoweth all things and cannot err. His will is sovereignly just, and all that he wills is good. All that he advises is holy. Supreme intelligence cannot be deceived. Perfect being cannot will what is evil. Nothing is above that which is supreme. Nothing is better than that which is perfect. None is worthy beside him but him who he has made worthy. He must be loved above all things and adored as the eternal King. You have abandoned your God. You have revolted against him. You have desired to be gods. You have fallen from your high estates. You have gone down like a fallen stone. Acknowledge that God is great, that his works are perfect, and that his judgments are just. Glory be to God through ages of ages, praises of joy for all his works. This is the song of the Archangel said to have been revealed to S. Amadeus. According to the Talmudists, Satan, whose proper name is Samael, was one of the seraphim with 6 wings. He was not driven out of heaven till after he had led Adam and Eve into sin. Then Samael and his hosts were precipitated out of the place of bliss with God's curse to weigh them down. In the struggle between Michael and Samael, the falling seraph caught the wings of Michael and tried to drag him down with him, but God saved him, whence Michael derives his name, the rescued. This is what the Rabbi Bechiah says in his commentary on the 5 books of Moses. According to a Talmudic authority, the apostate angels, having fallen in a heap, God laid his little finger on them and consumed them. Samael was the regent of the planet Mars, and this he rules still, and therefore it is that those born under the influence of that star are lovers of war and given to strife. He was chief among the angels of God, and now he is prince among devils. His name is derived from simi, which means to blind and deceive. He stands on the left side of men. He goes by various names, such as the old serpent, the unclean spirit, Satan, Leviathan, and sometimes also Azael. In his fall he spat in his hatred against God, and his spittle stained the moon, and thus it is that the moon has on it spots. After his fall, Satan took to himself 4 wives, Lilith, Nama, the daughter of Lamech and sister of Tubal-Cain, Egereth, and Machkalath. Each became the mother of a great host of devils, and each rules with the host over a season of the year. And at the change of the seasons there is a great gathering of devils about their mothers. Lilith is followed by 478 legions of devils, for that number is comprised in her name. According to some, Lilith is identical with Eve. She rules over Damascus, Nama over Tyre, Egereth over Malta and Rhodes, and Machalath over Crete. Many traditions date the pre-existence or the existence of angels and demons from a remote period before the creation of the world, but some connect the fall of Satan and his hosts with the creation of man. Abu Dujar Muhammad Tabari says that when God made Adam, he bade all the angels worship him as their king and superior, as says the Qumran. All the angels adored Adam, but that Satan or Iblis answered God, I will not adore Adam, for he is made of earth, and I of fire, therefore I am better than he. And that God thereon cursed Iblis and gave him the form of a devil, because of his pride, vain confidence, and disobedience. Al-Bufayda says, after God had made man, he thus addressed the angels, when I had breathed a portion of my spirit into him, bow before him and adore. After he had inspired Adam with his spirit, all the angels, every degree, adored him, except Iblis. He, through pride and envy, scorned to do this and disobeyed God. Then God cursed him, and he cut him off from all hope in divine mercy. And he called him Shaitan, regimen, Satan devoted to misery. And he cast him out, who had been before an angel of the earth and keeper of terrestrial things, and a guardian of paradise. But the general opinion seems to have been that the fall of angels preceded the creation of man. Even Ezra dates it on the second day of creation, others on the first day when God divided the light from the darkness. Manasseh ben Israel says that God has placed the devils in the clouds that they might torment the wicked with thunder and lightnings and showers of hail and tempests of wind, and that this took place on the second day when the firmaments were divided. As the fall of Satan took place through his aspiration to be God, so it closely connected with the origin of idolatry and false worship. For now that Satan is cast out of heaven, he still seeks to exalt himself in the place of God. Just a little bit more here. And therefore he leads men from the worship of the true God into demonolatry. Thus the gods of the heathens were regarded by the first Christians as devils, aspiring to receive that worship from men on earth, which they sought and failed to obtain in heaven. Thus St. Paul tells the Corinthians that the Gentiles sacrifice to devils. The temptation of Christ can only be fully understood when we bear in mind that pride and craving for worship is the prime source of Satan's actions. All these will I give thee, he said to Christ, if thou wilt fall down and worship me. It was a second attempt of Satan to set himself above the Most High. And that's the legends of the Patriarchs and the Prophets.
So that's another text. People are asking in the chat room, the legends of the Patriarchs and Prophets?
Yes.
So that's not Ginsburg. That's something else.
No, this is it's real old, and it's a compilation of not just Jewish but also Christian, Quran, Arabic, all mythologies of the world, and it's all about the Old Testament, the legends of the Patriarchs and the Prophets, all the Old Testament characters, and it covers the fall of the angels, the giants, all of that, and all the texts that I mentioned you can find at Sacred Word Publishing.
Yeah, I was going to ask you.
People were even asking about the Targum and all that.
Yeah,
all of them are there at sacredwordpublishing.com.
So have you compiled these into a book that you've published?
Yeah, this one is actually so thick it's 2 books.
Oh.
But yeah.
Do I have that one? I'll have to look.
You'll have to tell me, because I'm about to send you out another order.
Okay, I'll go through I got, like I said, I got a whole shelf on my bookshelf. It's like the Zen Garcia shelf.
Right.
It's like
I know
3 feet long.
I'll send you the book of the order.
Okay.
The ancients and the new ones, as well as the pre-Adamite, the Vestures, all those. So I'll get you these. Whatever you need, just let me know.
That's awesome, dude. I don't have. Probably not going to have time to read the Joshua account, so we'll put that off till your show next week. We'll read the Joshua account of Genesis 14.
All right.
Genesis 14, we've been camped here for like 3 weeks, it seems like.
There's so much, though,
There's a lot here. But yeah, man, you were... I know that I'm pretty sure in the Quran he's referred to as Iblis or Iblis or something like that.
Iblis, yeah.
Satan. And interestingly enough, that was the name of one of my favorite episodes of the original Battlestar Galactica TV show back in the 70s.
I used to love that show too.
Yeah, there was an episode where I think it was Starbuck and Apollo get taken over by angels. They end up on this like heavenly New Jerusalem like city in space, and there's an episode where the Battlestar Pegasus they find out that they're not alone. That the Pegasus survived the initial war, and then later they find the Pegasus is crashed on a planet, and this guy Count Iblis is there, and it's like a 2-part episode if I remember right. It was probably my favorite one, but it was very much, they were very careful with the way they identified the entities, but if you understand things like what we're talking about here, you say, well, wait a minute, this talking about angels and Satan right here in the Battlestar Galactica. Of course, Glenn Larson is a Mormon, so he infused a lot of Mormon theology into the series. But man, a lot of interesting stuff here. And you're talking about something was revealed to S. Amadeus, the song of Michael, that Michael sang?
That song. Forget what he said it was called.
Right there.
Yeah, right here.
This Song of the Archangel.
The Song of the Archangel. Yeah, and it does mention the name of the song at the very top here.
Well, and that looked like a footnote, right? Was it 2? It said
yes,
S. Amadeus.
Fabricius. Yeah, in his collections of the apocryphal writings of the Old Testament has preserved the Song of Triumph, which the Archangel Michael sang on obtaining the victory. And I wonder if this is part of the enthronement of Michael as well, because that manuscript is so long.
Yeah.
I mean, it is so long, and it covers the war in heaven, the fall of Satan, and all that. It's a very interesting manuscript. I think I have part of it published in The Great Contest Won, The War in Heaven. But yeah, it's a fascinating text.
Wow, man, there's so much in there. Well, earlier, actually, I think this was in the Legends of the Jews by Ginsburg. Abraham was 70 men tall, and he was taking strides.
Yeah.
That's got to be hyperbole. I mean,
yeah, you would think, unless God just wanted
supernaturally
to give him
made him
supernatural powers to.
Well, it does say he was aided. Well, and also another angel, Layla, fought for Abraham. So, I mean, you got to figure. I mean, they had just beat the 4 kings of giants under Kedorlaomer and Amraphel and Nimrod, beat the 5 kings of giants, and took Lot. And Abraham's like, yeah, okay, that's not going to work. Give me 318 guys. Let's go.
Right.
You know? I mean, it's
did it all alone.
Spartacus. He's still doing the Gerard Butler 300,
exactly.
But he had the help of Mamre, Aner, and Eshcol, which I maintain are Amorite giants, and he had the help of heaven. So that was like one serious battle.
Right.
Well, not much of a battle, it was a slaughter.
I'll mention that Layla is the angel over the souls. That in the Chronicles of Jeremiah, it is the angel Layla that takes the child while it's in the womb and shows it all of the things that's going to occur over its lifetime. And it's also the one that brings forth the soul that's going to enter into that particular body and enter into the womb of the mother.
Yeah, I've got the Dictionary of Angels by Davidson. I might have to look into that.
That's also the Chronicles of Jeremiah. I think it's chapter 9 on the formation of the child. It mentions the angel Layla in that.
Yeah, I remember the story. I didn't remember the angel by name, but I remember we've covered it in a previous show.
Right.
Samael runs Mars, so that should give you an indication of why everybody wants to go to Mars.
Right, and the big, and Mars is the warring planet as well.
Yeah, the big push to go to Mars, which is so ridiculous. Even if you believe the standard cosmological worldview model, even if you believe that, it's an 8-month journey. According to that model, if we believe that the Earth's a globe and it's in the Copernican model, it's 8 months with current technology to get there. You're going to tell me that you're going to cram 3 or 4 people into a Volkswagen Beetle sized space, basically. I mean, you're talking like a Volkswagen for 8 months on a one-way trip. You can't get out. You can't go anywhere. You're stuck with these people for 8 months. When you get there, there's no food, water, or anything for you to do. And then you're going to go 8 months back, crammed in a Volkswagen with 3 or 4 people. Yeah, right. It's so ridiculous. The absurdity of the whole thing. Even if we were to believe that model, it is completely ridiculous and totally fiscally irresponsible to be spending that kind of money for a pipe dream that will never go anywhere or do anything for us. Even in the model, if you believe that model, it's the amount of things that we could do here that needs to be done to fix this place is where that money should be going. So this just shows it's a satanic deception. And, if Samael's in charge of Mars, well, there you go.
It reminds me, too, I just saw some news story about how NASA has this probe orbiting some asteroid, and it's been orbiting it for 2 years, and now has landed on it, and it came with all this great animation, and they're talking about all these achievements, and I was just making fun of, oh yeah, at least they're doing something with the $56 million that they're stealing from us for every day, and the girl that was working for me was laughing. And
it's so ridiculous. I mean, people have been fooled by cartoons and CGI animation, and it's just ridiculous. But we got 6 minutes left. A couple other things that jumped out at me in my mind when you were reading was the animals of Abraham's sacrifice having very specific meanings.
Oh, right, yeah. Even with the kingdoms, and then Israel, and also the resurrection and the coming of Messiah.
Yeah.
That was very interesting.
Yeah, and Satan's 4 wives, that's a bit of a trip. I'd like to at some point explore the lore of Lilith a bit more.
We can do that sometime if you want.
Yeah, that would be something worth looking into, because it's certainly, I mean, it's prevalent.
There's a lot, yeah.
I mean, even in Scripture, we don't see it because we get translations like screech owl or whatever in English.
Right.
But when you look at the Hebrew, you're like, wait a minute, let's talk about Lilith here.
Right.
So, I mean, the Jews certainly had an understanding of this entity.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to go back. I'm going to have to rewatch the archive of this show and and look at that again, what you had there. But it was kind of cool. It mentioned that Terah repented and Ishmael too.
Yeah.
They repented.
Mm-hmm. And that Esau would go crazy
after he died.
Yeah.
Right. Wow, there's a lot there, man.
I pulled up that chapter on Layla. I'll just read the first passage, just where it mentions her. It says, I will now proceed to explain the formation of the fetus which God created when man approaches his wife. God indicates it to the angel appointed over conception, whose name is Layla. God says, know that this night a woman will conceive, take the sperm, place it into thy hand, break it on the threshing floor into 365 particles. He does so, and then takes the sperm in his hand, brings it to God, and says, O Lord of the world, I have done as thou hast commanded me, and now decree what is to become of it. And God then decrees that it will be either strong or weak, male or female, rich or poor, beautiful or ugly, long or short, wicked or righteous. God then makes a sign to the angel appointed over spirits and says, bring me a certain spirit which is hidden in the Garden of Eden, whose name is so-and-so and whose form is so-and-so. And then that spirit comes forth into... this applies to all spirits which are destined to be created. For from the very moment when the world was created, all these spirits were prepared for men. And so it goes on and on. So if people want to read it, they can look it up.
Yeah, while you were reading that, I looked up Layla in the A Dictionary of Angels, including the Fallen Angels by Gustav Davidson.
Cool.
And in here it says Layla is the name said to derive from a rabbinic exegesis of the word Layla, meaning night, in Job 3:3. According to the Zohar Exodus, Layla is an, quote, an angel appointed to guard the spirits at their birth, end quote. In Jewish legendary lore, Layla is a demonic angel of the night, the prince of conception, to be compared with Lilith, demoness of conception. However, in the Genesis Rabbah 4:17 and then the Sanhedrin 96a, Jewish Encyclopedia 1, the story is that Layla fought for Abraham when the patriarch battled the kings, which would make Layla a good rather than a wicked angel.
Yeah, that's what it says in Legends of the Jews.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a valuable resource too. This. Yeah, I think Kevin sent you a copy too, didn't he?
Yeah, I bought the book offline.
Yeah, it's these are valuable things. And this one's I got so
much.
I've got this thing's looks like a peacock. I have all these little post-it notes sticking up out of it, like
right on.
Fan out for references. But you know what I'm finding, I don't play video games. I mean, I haven't really played video games since Atari 2600 back in the day.
Yeah.
You know, I used to play them a lot back then, but you know, as I got older, just never had time to do it. But I like to see, you know, kind of what's hot out there, and YouTube has tons of videos, both of people playing the games as well as I like to check out the stories that are between gameplay. So they'll have like some sort of animated story happens, and then the player gets into some kind of, you know, gameplay. But people have taken the excerpts just of the stories and put them online, and these people, they've read this stuff because so many of the things that we're covering here find their way into these video games. Of course, they're twisted though, you know, because it's a secular world dealing with I mean, they're looking at the stuff, they're reading this stuff, and they're saying, hey, great, they're mining it for story activity, but, you know, it's just like Darren Aronofsky with Noah, right? I mean, how do you screw that up? So this is why we're trying to do Seed, guys. We're trying to get it right.
Right, exactly.
But
do it the right way,
do it the right way. Anyway, another awesome show. We'll continue next week on yours, next Thursday. And I can start with Joshua, what is it, chapter 16, I think, whatever the next chapter is in Joshua. Covers Genesis 14, and then, okay, Joshua 16, and then we can move on to Genesis 15, which some of what you read covered that. So, all right.
All right, brother.
See you next week. Awesome show. Blessings.
Good night, all.
Good night, everybody.